You ever walk into a room and feel the universe hiccup? Like, everything you thought you knew about gravity, family, and the concept of safe spaces just packs a duffel and skips town? That was me, Thursday evening, 7:13 p.m., standing at the threshold of what used to be my life. I didn't slam the door. I eased it shut because instinct told me loud noises didn't belong in this kind of scene. And then I saw her, Naomi, my wife, kneeling, not in prayer, not searching for a dropped earring, kneeling in front of a man who, just that morning, I'd hugged like a son-in-law to be. A man who was supposed to stand at an altar in less than 15 hours and promise to cherish my daughter forever. Instead, he was half-zipped and wholly damned, with the kind of smirk men wear when they've never tasted consequences. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. My body just rooted to the floor like one of those ancient trees people chain themselves to during protests. My heartbeat, though, that sucker was a jackhammer in my ears. And yet, I didn't make a sound. Because there's a quiet so sharp it can cut through bone, and right then, I was holding the blade. She didn't notice me. Neither did he. They were lost in whatever dark bargain they'd struck, hands clutching, lips murmuring words I couldn't hear but could guess. And in that moment, two truths cracked open like eggs on hot asphalt. One, the marriage I thought I was saving by writing checks and swallowing pride was already a chalk outline. And two, my daughter was hours away from binding herself to a man who had just unzipped his vows on my carpet. What do you do with that? Scream? Charge? Call the cops? No. I did what any man who spent a lifetime pretending not to bleed would do. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and hit FaceTime. Because if the world was going to split in two, I wanted witnesses. I wanted my daughter to see what forever looked like before it devoured her whole. My thumb hovered, then pressed call. It rang once, twice, and then a phone rang from the corner of the room. My eyes cut toward the sound like a spotlight, and that's when the second floor of hell collapsed onto the first. There she was, my daughter, standing in the shadows near the dresser like a specter at her own funeral, her phone buzzing in her hand, her face carved from something older than 22 years should allow. She didn't look shocked. She didn't look broken. She looked resigned, like someone who's been rehearsing this moment in a mirror for weeks. Dad, she said softly, and her voice was the kind that makes grown men kneel, not from devotion, but defeat. You need to know something. The room tilted. My knees didn't give, but everything inside me did. And that, my friend, is where the Rayall story begins. You ever been in a room so tense you swear the air could file for a restraining order? That was us, three people breathing the same oxygen, but on different planets entirely. Naomi still on her knees, frozen mid-sin. The groom-to-be with his fly half open like guilt had a zipper, and my daughter, Lena, standing in that shadowed corner, eyes locked on mine with a calm that felt scarier than any scream. No one moved. Not even me. I just lowered the phone slowly, like it weighed 50 pounds now. My chest was an orchestra pit, strings snapping, drums pounding, but my face stayed marble. Funny thing about years of swallowing words. When you finally hit the breaking point, silence becomes your sharpest weapon. Naomi scrambled up first, fumbling for excuses that died on her lips. I can explain, she started, but her voice cracked like an old vinyl. Explain? I wanted to laugh, but the sound would have come out jagged, like glass in a blender. The fiancé, Evan, that smug little investment banker who used to call me sir, was backing toward the dresser, zipping up like modesty suddenly mattered. His mouth opened, maybe to apologize, maybe to barter for his pathetic life, but Lena cut him down with a glance so cold it could have frosted glass. Don't, she said, quiet as snowfall. One word, but it landed like a gavel. And then she turned those eyes on me. Dad, please, just sit. Sit. I almost laughed again. Because how do you sit when the ground's been yanked out from under you? But I didn't argue. I walked to the edge of the bed, lowered myself onto the mattress that had probably hosted more secrets than I wanted to imagine, and folded my hands like I was waiting for communion. Naomi moved toward me, hand out like I was a stray dog she thought she could soothe. It's not what it looks like, she whispered. And that's when I finally spoke. My voice didn't rise. It fell, low, deliberate, the kind of tone that makes people lean in because they'd rather not hear what's coming. Naomi, I said, eyes never leaving hers. If you finish that sentence, I swear you'll wish I'd just yelled. Her mouth snapped shut so fast I heard teeth click. Good. Then Lena stepped forward, her phone still in her hand, screen glowing like a tiny moon in that dim room. She looked, not angry, not shattered, but like someone carrying a truth so heavy it warped her spine. "Dad," she said again, and this time her voice had steel under the silk. "You need to know something. About the wedding. About him." She flicked her eyes toward Evan, who looked like he wanted to crawl into the carpet. "And about Mom." My throat tightened like a fist. "Start talking," I said. And then she smiled. A small, bitter curve that didn't belong on my little girl's face. "No," she whispered, slipping her phone into her clutch. "Not here. Not yet." She glanced at Naomi, then at Evan, and her smile sharpened into something that made the hair on my arm stand up. "If you think this is the worst thing that's going to happen today, Dad, you're wrong." And with that, she walked out, heels clicking on hardwood like a countdown, leaving me with a wife who couldn't look me in the eye and a groom whose hands were shaking like dice in a rigged game. I didn't follow her. Not yet, because I had a feeling Lena wasn't running away. She was setting the stage. You ever feel like you've been drafted into a play mid-scene? No script, no cue, just the blinding spotlight of everyone else's secrets? That's where I sat, on the edge of a bed that smelled faintly of hotel soap and treachery, while Naomi and Evan stared at me like I was holding a detonator. I didn't speak, not because I didn't have questions, but because silence had become my currency, and right now, it was worth more than gold. Let them sweat. Let the room choke on its own lies. Naomi broke first, of course. She always did. "It's not what you think," she started again, voice thin as tissue paper. I tilted my head, slow, like an owl considering its prey. "You sure about that?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks exactly like what I think." Evan cleared his throat, but Naomi shot him a look sharp enough to flay skin. "Just shut up," she hissed, then turned back to me, lower, pleading now. "Please, Michael, don't make this bigger than it already is." I almost laughed. Bigger than this. My wife on her knees in front of our daughter's fiancé hours before the vows. That's not big. That's the Super Bowl of betrayal. That's a Greek tragedy with better lighting. But before I could answer, the door swung open. Lena. She was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that makes you think someone's about to flip the whole chessboard. Her phone wasn't in her hand anymore, but her expression said she was holding something heavier than a device. "Dad," she said, her tone all business. "We're leaving. Now." I stood, more out of instinct than obedience. "Lena, wait, what the hell is going on?" Her eyes flicked to Naomi and Evan like they were furniture. "Disposable. You'll find out," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "But not here. Not with them." "Sweetheart." Naomi started, reaching for her arm. "Bad move." Lena stepped back like her mother's touch was acid. "Don't," she snapped, quiet but lethal. "You've done enough." And then Evan opened his mouth. God help him. "Lena, listen, I can explain." "Explain?" She laughed. Once. Short. Sharp. The kind of laugh you hear before someone sets fire to the house. You think you're the only one with secrets. Something in her tone froze the air. My gut tightened. "Lena," I said slowly, "what do you mean?" She looked at me then. Really looked. Eyes dark with something I hadn't seen since she was little and her cat got hit by a car. That mix of sorrow and fury that says someone's about to rip the floorboards up. "Dad," she said, voice low, deliberate. "He's not the man you think he is. And neither is Mom." My pulse thudded in my ears. "Start talking," I ordered. But Lena just smiled, that same bitter smile from before, turned on her heel, and walked out, tossing one sentence over her shoulder like a grenade. "Meet me in the garden in 5 minutes. If you really want to know who you married." The door clicked shut. Silence returned, heavier than ever. Naomi started to speak again, but I held up a hand. "Don't," I said, my voice like steel cooling in water. Not another word. And then I followed my daughter into the night, knowing 2 things for certain. 1, this wedding was about to turn into a crime scene. And 2, I wasn't sure whose side I'd be on when the dust settled. The garden was lit like a fairy tale written by someone who hates happy endings. Strings of white lights draped through the oaks, casting halos over rows of chairs neatly lined for a ceremony that might never happen. The flowers smelled sweet, but underneath was something bitter, the kind of scent you notice when your life is rotting from the roots. Lena was there, standing at the edge of the fountain like some dark bride in her rehearsal dress, arms folded tight across her chest. Her phone dangled from her fingers, screen still glowing. She didn't look at me when I approached, just stared at the water like it held the script to this whole mess. "Talk," I said. My voice sounded strange even to me, flat, dangerous, like a man circling the edge of a cliff. She didn't move for a long beat. Then, finally, How long have you loved her? She asked softly. The question hit me like a sucker punch. What? Her head turned slowly, and when her eyes met mine, I saw it. The fracture line, the crack running down the center of the girl I raised. Naomi, she said, how long have you loved a woman who doesn't love you back? The world tilted. Lena, what does that? She's been cheating on you for years, Dad. No hesitation, no flinch. Just truth, sharp and merciless. And not just with Evan. I stared at her. My throat went dry. You knew? She laughed, short, bitter, jagged at the edges. Knew? Dad, I've been covering for her since I was 16. Deleting texts when she left her phone out. Making excuses for her disappearing acts. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if you didn't know, you wouldn't break. My chest burned, but I couldn't tell if it was rage or shame. And Evan? I asked, my voice a low growl. Her jaw tightened. That wasn't her idea. The words hung there like a noose. What the hell does that mean? I stepped closer, but she didn't back away. She just looked at me with those eyes, Naomi's eyes, only colder. It means, she said, her tone like a blade sliding from its sheath, that Evan isn't who you think he is. He wasn't marrying me for love. He was marrying me for leverage. My pulse roared in my ears. Leverage for what? She raised her phone slowly, thumb hovering over the screen. For this, she whispered. Then she tapped, and the video bloomed to life. A shaky shot of Evan, shirtless, whispering into the camera like a man confessing to a priest. I'll have access to everything once we're married, his voice murmured. The accounts, the trust. Naomi promised me half if I keep my mouth shut about, their little arrangement. The camera shook. Then his voice dropped to a chuckle. Lena doesn't suspect a thing. Poor kid actually thinks I love her. The video ended. The garden lights hummed. And my daughter, my little girl, looked me dead in the eye and said the words that split my life clean in two. Dad, Naomi set the whole thing up. You ever feel the ground hum under your feet like a train's coming and you're the one tied to the tracks? That was me, walking back toward that glowing venue with Lena at my side, her heels tapping like gunshots on stone. My hands weren't fists yet, but they were itching. Itching for something. Justice, revenge, maybe just the satisfaction of breaking silence wide open. Inside, the music swelled like an apology nobody meant. Guests were laughing, glasses clinking, oblivious to the grenade I was about to toss into their little fantasy. Evan was nowhere in sight, probably still in the bedroom, zipping up shame. Naomi, though, she was at the bar, smiling, charming, playing the perfect hostess like her knees hadn't just been on my carpet. Dad, Lena murmured, catching my arm before I pushed through the double doors. Her voice was low, steel-wrapped in silk. You can't just storm in and blow this up. Not yet. I stared at her like she'd started speaking Mandarin. Not yet? He planned to marry you for money. Your mother practically brokered the deal like she was flipping a house, and you want me to wait? She nodded once, calm as an assassin. Because if you go in there now, all you get is a scandal. But if you let me handle this, Dad, you get a reckoning. That word, reckoning. It didn't sound like something my daughter should know how to wield, but the way she said it made me believe she'd been sharpening it for years. What exactly are you planning? I asked, my voice low, dangerous. She glanced at her phone. A faint smile tugged her lips, cold and elegant. A little theater, she said. You always said I had a flair for drama. And before I could stop her, she pushed through those double doors like a queen walking into her coronation. Head high, shoulders back, not a crack in the porcelain. Guests turned, smiling, some clapping, thinking they were watching a bride-to-be glowing in pre-wedding bliss. If only they knew. Naomi saw her first. Her smile froze, just for a second, then snapped back on like a mask glued with panic. She started toward us, but Lena raised one finger, tiny, casual, imperial, and Naomi stopped dead like she'd hit an invisible wall. I followed Lena up the aisle, my pulse drumming a funeral march. She didn't go to the altar. She went to the mic. One soft tap echoed through the speakers, silencing chatter like a gunshot in a church. Every head swiveled. The band stopped mid-note, and my daughter, in her ivory dress, looked out at a sea of eager faces and said the 5 words that turned the room into a live wire. This wedding is not happening. Gasps cracked like thunder. Naomi's wineglass shattered on the floor. Evan appeared in the doorway, face pale, tie dangling like a noose. And Lena? She smiled, slow, cruel, beautiful, and said, but you're all going to want to hear why. She held up her phone. The screen glowed. The video, the one with Evan's little confession, was ready to play on full blast. Naomi lunged for her, but I stepped between them so fast chairs scraped across the floor. For the first time in 20 years, Naomi saw something in my face that made her stop moving. Because I wasn't the man she married anymore. I was the storm she didn't see coming. The room held its breath. You could feel it, like the air itself had stepped back, bracing for impact. Every guest frozen mid-sip, cameras halfway raised, the faint clink of ice melting in forgotten glasses. And in the center of it all, Lena, standing at that mic like a conductor about to unleash a symphony of ruin. She tapped the screen once. The speakers crackled, and then Evan's voice slithered into the room, smug and damning. I'll have access to everything once we're married. Naomi promised me half if I keep my mouth shut about, their little arrangement. Gas shot like fireworks. Heads whipped toward Naomi, whose face had gone the color of unbaked dough. Evan stumbled forward, hands out like he could physically shove the words back into the phone. Lena, stop. No, she said, her voice slicing through the panic like a scalpel. You had your turn, Evan. Now it's mine. The video kept rolling, Evan chuckling, bragging about how the poor kid doesn't suspect a thing. When it ended, the silence that followed was thick enough to drown in. I looked at Naomi. Her eyes weren't pleading yet. Oh no, she wasn't there. She was still in spin mode, scrambling for a script in that polished head of hers. But Lena wasn't done. Some of you might be wondering, she said, smiling faintly at the guests who were now leaning so far forward you'd think secrets were oxygen, why my mother would do something like this. Why she'd promise a stranger money that doesn't belong to her. Her gaze swung to Naomi, sharp as a blade. Maybe because she's been draining my father dry for years. Lying, cheating, and scheming behind his back while he paid every bill and every dream she couldn't afford. Naomi finally snapped. That's enough, she shouted, stepping toward Lena like she could claw the words out of her mouth. I moved faster. My hand gripped Naomi's arm, not gently. She froze, whipping her head toward me, ready to spit fire. But whatever she saw in my face, whatever quiet apocalypse was brewing there, made her swallow the words instead. Lena wasn't even looking at us. She was looking at the crowd. You all came here for a wedding, she said, voice calm now, almost serene. But all you're getting is the truth. My mother isn't who she pretends to be. And Evan? She tilted her chin toward him like he was a cockroach she'd trapped under glass. He's not marrying anyone today. He's leaving with a cab ride and a reputation that'll follow him like a shadow. The guests erupted. Whispers like a storm surge, phones whipping up to record, because why just witness a car crash when you can live stream it? Evan tried to speak, but the sound was swallowed by a tide of murmurs and stifled laughter. And then Naomi hissed, low and venomous. Michael, do something. I turned to her slowly, savoring the weight of this moment. The years of quiet sacrifices, the countless times I bit my tongue to keep this family from splintering. My voice came out steady, colder than any scream could have been. Oh, I will, I said. But not for you. Her eyes widened just as Lena stepped down from the mic, sliding her phone into her clutch like an assassin sheathing her blade. She brushed past Naomi without a glance, then looked at me. Ready, Dad? She asked softly. And in that moment, I realized something strange. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I expected. I was free, like a man walking out of a burning house, without even smelling the smoke. I nodded. Let's go. We turned toward the exit, leaving Naomi to drown in her own theater of ruin. But as I reached the door, I heard her voice behind me, sharp, desperate, cracking like old glass. Michael, if you walk out now, you'll regret it. I paused, hand on the doorframe, turned just enough for her to see the smile on my face. No, I said. I've been regretting staying. Then I pushed the door open and stepped into the cool night, my daughter beside me, the sound of chaos blooming behind us like fireworks on a funeral pyre. You ever sit in a car so quiet you can hear both your heart and your past beating at the same time? That was us. Me behind the wheel, Lena in the passenger seat, the venue shrinking in the rearview like a crime scene fading into the dark. The dashboard clock blinked 9:47 p.m. in cold green numbers, and all I could think was, 48 hours ago, I was Googling father of the bride toast ideas. Now, I was wondering if I'd just raised the executioner. Lena stared out the window, her face reflecting slivers of passing streetlights. Calm. Too calm. The kind of calm people wear after dropping bombs and walking away from the mushroom cloud. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Start talking, I said, voice low, steady. No riddles this time. Why'd you do it like that? Her lips curved, barely a smile, more like the shadow of one. Because secrets rot, Dad. And this family was a landfill. That explains the theatrics, I muttered. Doesn't explain the video. How long have you known about Evan? She turned her head slowly. Those eyes, Naomi's eyes, only harder, locking on mine. About him? 6 weeks. She paused. About Mom? 8 years. 8 years. The numbers sat in my gut like a brick. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. You could have told me, I said. God, Lena, why didn't you tell me? She laughed. Not cruel, not amused, just tired. And then what? You leave her? You think I wanted to be the reason my parents' marriage blew up when I was 14? She shook her head. No, I thought I could control it. Contain it. Make it mean less. I swallowed hard. And Evan? Her jaw tightened. He wasn't just some random fiancé, Dad. He was leverage. Mom brought him in. Made promises. She wanted out, but not broke. So she dangled me like bait. The words hit like a fist to the ribs. Jesus Christ, I whispered. Oh, it gets worse. Her voice softened, which somehow made it hit harder. She reached into her clutch, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and placed it on my lap. I wasn't going to tell you this until after the wedding. But since there's no wedding, I flicked on the dome light, unfolded the paper, and the bottom dropped out of my stomach. It wasn't a love note. It wasn't blackmail. It was a copy of a power of attorney, notarized, giving Naomi full control of the family trust, effective on my death or declaration of incapacity. My signature stared back at me, except I'd never signed it. My voice was barely a whisper. This isn't real. Lena's gaze was steel. It's real enough for a bank to believe it. Mom's been moving pieces for months. Evan was just the final act. They marry. She secures everything. Quietly, legally. And then, well, who knows what happens to you? The car seemed to shrink, the air thickening until every breath scraped my throat. You're telling me your mother forged my signature? I'm telling you, she said, leaning in just slightly, her words sharp as glass, that Mom and Evan were planning a future without you in it. We drove in silence for a mile, the kind of silence that howls. My world wasn't just cracked, it was gone, swept clean, like someone had dragged an eraser over the blueprint of my life. Finally, I asked the question I'd been dreading since I left that garden. Why now, Lena? Why tonight? She looked back out the window, her reflection flickering in the glass like a ghost. Because, Dad, she exhaled, slow, heavy. They weren't the only ones planning something. And then she smiled, a smile that didn't belong to any little girl I remembered tucking in at night. You ever feel the temperature in a car drop without touching the AC? That's what happened when Lena said those words. They weren't the only ones planning something. Her voice didn't tremble, didn't hesitate. It slid out smooth, like she'd rehearsed it. I tightened my grip on the wheel. What does that mean? She didn't answer right away, just leaned her head against the window, watching the blur of headlights streak across the glass. When she finally spoke, her tone was soft, almost tender, like she was telling me a bedtime story she'd rewritten into a cautionary tale. Dad, she said, do you remember when I was 15 and you asked if I wanted a car for my 16th birthday? And I said no, because I'd been saving for college? I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. Well, she continued, her fingers tracing patterns on her phone screen, that wasn't entirely true. I wasn't saving for college. I was saving for insurance. That word hit like a punch. Insurance for what? For this, she said, holding up her phone. For today. For every day since Mom started turning you into a ghost. The light from the screen washed her face pale as she scrolled through folders, photos, emails, PDFs, voice memos, bank statements. A digital war chest. I've been watching her for years, Lena said calmly. Following the money, the messages. Every time she thought she was being clever, I was 2 steps ahead. And when Evan showed up, I knew exactly what she was doing. So I played along. You played along? My voice cracked like old wood. You let him propose? Let the whole damn wedding spin up just to what? Humiliate them? She turned her head slowly, and the look in her eyes chilled me to my bones. Not just humiliate, Dad. Ruin. Publicly. Permanently. So they can't crawl out of it. Not together. Not separately. The words settled like ash in the silence. I stared at her, trying to find the teenager I raised. The one who cried over a failed chemistry test. The one who begged for a rescue puppy when she was 9. But that girl was gone. What sat beside me was something else entirely. Lena, I said carefully, what exactly have you done? Her lips curved, faint, sharp. Do you know how fast a story spreads when it's not just gossip, but evidence? Evan's little video? That's already in 6 group chats, 2 private Facebook groups, and a Dropbox link I emailed to the Herald about 20 minutes ago. My pulse thudded in my ears. You sent it to the press? Oh, Dad. She almost laughed. Not just the press. To his firm. To every client he brags about. To his old college buddies. Because humiliation tastes better when it goes viral. And your mother? I asked, my voice low, dangerous. That, Lena said, her smile sharpening into something almost predatory, is part 2. Which drops tomorrow. I felt my chest tighten. What's part 2? She slid her phone into her clutch, then looked at me with a calm so absolute it scared me more than her anger ever could. Let's just say, she whispered, Mom's going to wake up to a world where every bridge she's ever built is ash. Social, financial, legal, burned. I've got copies of the forged POA, the shell accounts, even her little messages to Evan about how poor Michael won't see it coming. By noon tomorrow, she won't just lose this family. She'll lose everything. For a moment, the only sound was the tires humming against asphalt. Then I said the one thing I wasn't sure I believed. Lena, this isn't you. Her laugh was soft, bitter, like the scrape of broken glass. Maybe not, but it's who she made me. And then she reached over, laid her hand on mine. Gentle, almost tender. Don't stop me, Dad. It's already in motion. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because deep down, I knew something awful. She wasn't bluffing. This wasn't revenge. This was annihilation. And for the first time that night, I wondered if Naomi and Evan were the only ones about to lose everything. You ever wake up and know, before you even open your eyes, that the world you fell asleep in doesn't exist anymore? That was me at 6:14 a.m., lying on a couch that smelled like dust and old decisions. My phone was buzzing like a hornet's nest on the coffee table. 15 missed calls, 8 voicemails, 33 texts. Every single one from Naomi. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles, like it was mocking me. Round and round. Same motion, different day. Except today wasn't different. Today was nuclear. The TV flickered on with the remote still in my hand from last night. Local news. Bottom ticker crawling with the words that punched me in the gut. Financial advisor Evan Cole under fire for fraud allegations. Wedding scandal rocks local social scene. There was a still photo of Evan in his tux, looking smug, cropped from what was supposed to be his big day. I didn't need to read the article. I knew exactly where the fire started. And then the anchor said Naomi's name. My chest tightened as her picture appeared on the screen, smiling that same polished smile she'd worn at every fundraiser, every holiday party. Only now it was paired with words like forgery and trust fund dispute and potential criminal liability. I turned the TV off before the bile in my throat turned into something worse. Behind me, the sound of footsteps. Lena, barefoot, wearing one of my old sweatshirts like armor. Coffee mug in hand, steam curling into the dim morning light. You've been busy, I said flatly. She sipped without looking at me. It's only phase 1. Phase 1. My voice cracked like ice in a glass. Lena, you torched their lives in 12 hours. Correction, she said, setting the mug down with surgical precision. I exposed them. They lit the match when they decided you didn't matter. I rubbed my face, feeling every year I'd aged in one night. And when this comes back on you, when people start asking how you got those files, those messages, what then? She smiled, small and sharp. It won't, because I didn't send them from me. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. Lena, what did you do? She leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a confession and a dare all at once. Every email, every leak, every post, it all traces back to Mom's own laptop. The metadata, the timestamps, the IP address. By the time she finishes her first cup of coffee, she'll look like the architect of her own downfall. I stared at her, stunned. You framed your mother. No, she said coolly, eyes steady on mine. I just let her truth do the work. I made sure the world saw it first. My phone buzzed again, another call from Naomi. My thumb hovered over the screen. Answer? Ignore? Smash it against the wall. Then Lena said something that froze me harder than any headline, any revelation so far. Dad? She whispered, almost gently. By tonight, she'll have nothing left. No money, no friends, no reputation. And when that happens, she'll run to you. I felt my pulse slam against my ribs. And then what? Lena's smile widened, slow, cold, terrifying in its calm. Then you decide what kind of man you really are. The phone stopped buzzing. Silence thickened between us, heavy as wet cement. I didn't ask the question clawing at my throat, because I already knew the answer. This wasn't about saving me, or even justice. This was Lena's endgame. And God help me, I wasn't sure if I wanted to stop her. By 8:03 p.m., the sky was bruised purple, and my house, the one I'd built, paid for, protected, felt like the stage for a Greek tragedy with Wi-Fi. The news cycle had eaten Naomi alive. Every outlet ran with it: financial advisor, socialite, and groom exposed in fraud scandal. Her photo, Evan's photo, even mine, lurking in the background of family pictures like the oblivious husband who never saw the guillotine swinging. I didn't expect her to come here. I figured pride would keep her in hiding. But at 8:17 sharp, headlights swept across the driveway. A car door slammed. And then, the knock. 3 quick raps that sounded more like a plea than a threat. Lena didn't flinch. She sat at the kitchen table, scrolling her phone with surgical calm, like she was live-tracking the ruin she orchestrated. I walked to the door, every step heavier than the last, and opened it. Naomi stood there in the same dress from last night, creased, wine-stained, dignity hanging by a thread. Her eyes were wild, rimmed red, mascara smudged like war paint. In her hands, nothing. No purse, no phone. Just a woman stripped of all the illusions she'd worn like armor. "Michael," she whispered. Her voice cracked in the middle, like glass underfoot. "Please, let me in." For a moment, I just stared. My wife. My betrayer. The mother of the girl who'd turned into something I didn't recognize. The woman who once promised me forever and spent 8 years chiseling away at it in the dark. Behind me, Lena spoke without looking up. "Don't." One word. Flat. Cold. Naomi's head snapped toward the sound. "You," she hissed, stepping forward, but I blocked her with my arm. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw it. The desperation, the calculation, the faint flicker of hope that I'd still be the same man who always cleaned up her messes. "Michael," she said again, softer now, weaponizing the crack in her voice. "They're saying things that aren't true. You know me. You know I would never." "Stop," I said quietly. And she did, because something in my tone told her the man she thought she knew was gone. For a long beat, none of us spoke. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint echo of Naomi's breath hitching in the doorway. Then I asked the question that had been sitting like a stone in my chest since last night. Was it worth it? Her lips parted, closed, opened again. But nothing came out, because there's no answer that can stitch a severed life back together. Lena rose from her chair then, slow and deliberate, her phone in one hand like a dagger. "Tell her, Dad," she said softly. "Tell her it's over." Naomi's eyes darted between us, pleading now, raw, human in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Michael, please." I could have done a lot of things. Could have slammed the door. Could have let her in and drowned in explanations. Could have screamed until my throat tore. But instead, I stepped aside, not to welcome her in, but to clear her path. "There's nothing for you here," I said. My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It was steady, final, like a gavel hitting oak. "Go." Her breath hitched again, a sharp, broken sound that made something deep in me flinch. But I didn't move. I didn't falter. I just watched as her shoulders slumped, her heels scraped against the porch, and she walked back into the night like a queen stripped of her crown. When the taillights disappeared, I shut the door. The click of the lock echoed like a verdict. Lena exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding that breath for years. Then she looked at me, her eyes soft now, the steel melted down to something almost fragile. "Did I do the right thing?" she whispered. And that, God help me, was the question I couldn't answer. Because the truth was brutal. I didn't know if we'd won anything. All I knew was this. I'd walked into that bedroom 24 hours ago, thinking the worst thing I could lose was a marriage. Turns out, that was just the opening act. I crossed the kitchen, placed a hand on Lena's shoulder, and said the only thing that felt true. "We survived this. Somehow." She nodded, blinking back something that might have been tears. For the first time in hours, I almost reached for her hand. Almost. Instead, I walked to the window, staring out at the dark, wondering if the real storm had just begun. Because when families burn, the ashes don't always stay buried.